Good evening. Wow, it is such an honor to be here at the Clinton School, right across from the Presidential Library, which I had the privilege and the pleasure of having a tour right before this talk this evening, and what an incredible experience and how awe-inspiring. And it raised a question for me, and this is the question that I'd like to begin with this evening, which is, why am I here? I don't mean the metaphysical question, though I'm happy to talk about that over drinks later, but rather, why am I, Noah Blumenthal, here speaking at the Clinton School for Public Service? As the website shows, the speaker series features ambassadors and governors, diplomats and news anchors, well, and yes, one former professional wrestler. But they all share one thing in common. They all talk politics. I don't. In fact, in my business life, my public persona, I rigorously avoid the topic. I am, after all, trying to make a living in the business world, so I'm afraid of associating myself with a color, red or blue, and turning my audiences off to my message, at least 50% of them. Yet here I am. I speak to corporate and nonprofit audiences all the time about leadership and resilience, about how to be at their best when their challenges are on the rise. It's not political, it's mental. So why am I here? Well, the answer is to help you be better prepared to face the challenges in your world. Today, I'm going to offer you a system that you can use to perform at your best when your best performance is most needed, and also to persevere through even the most extreme challenges. Now, since this is the Clinton School, I thought we could talk about this today in terms of a campaign. Let's talk about this as a campaign for living, a campaign for overcoming the challenges and the crises that you face, as well as rising to the occasion for the opportunities you discover in your life. So, let's begin with the idea of why it's so important to perform at your best when your best performance is most needed. This may seem obvious, but really what we're talking about here is being at your best when the pressure is on. And for examples of this, I'd like to look at the 2000 and the 2008 presidential debates. So the 2000 presidential debate will forever be etched in my mind. It will forever be etched in my mind from the SNL routine. Yes, I see you remember it well. The moment that is etched in my mind is the moment where Jim Parnell, playing Jim Lair, turns to Will Ferrell as George Bush, and he asks him a question about prescription medication. But before Will Ferrell can answer, Darrell Hammond jumps in and he says, "Jim, I'd like to answer that question as if it were addressed to me." Right there, SNL got him. They nailed it. They got it exactly right. Al Gore lost his cool. He was impatient, and in that moment where his best performance was needed, he couldn't keep his composure. Imagine how different the last decade would have been if he had simply stayed calm during that one debate. That alone could have swayed that election. Now, in 2008, the political roles were reversed. This time it was the Democrat who was unflappable, who laughed off every affront, and the Republican candidate who couldn't keep his composure. Imagine how different our political landscape would be today were that not the case. And so the first thing that this system we're going to discuss today will do is it will help you to perform under pressure, to be at your best when you do need that best performance. But also, you need to be able to perform against even extreme challenges, when the odds are stacked against you. And in our world, we have all kinds of challenges of extreme nature: poverty, global warming, unprecedented deficits, education gaps, so much more. How are you going to maintain your belief that you can make a difference against such long odds and seemingly insurmountable challenges? In the March edition of Fast Company this year, Nancy Lublin, the founder of an organization called Dress for Success, she said that people who take on these issues, these world-improving issues, tend to be very driven, but that they drive themselves to burnout. We need methods to keep ourselves going. The system we're going to discuss will enable you not only to take action, but to keep taking action, no matter how difficult or daunting the challenges in front of you. So, I may not solve any political conundrums here this evening, but hopefully you will each leave here better prepared to take on the personal, the professional, political, and public challenges ahead of you. So let's build our campaign. And of course, any great campaign is founded on a great slogan. Slogans matter. They matter for how well we remember and associate with an idea, and they matter for how well that idea pushes us to action. Slogans make a difference. Let me give you two examples. For my first example, I have a question for you. In the United States, which state residents do you think have the greatest state pride? You just call it out. I hear Texas? Y'all think so? All right. So I grew up in California and then New York, and I thought both places were pretty cool. I mean, I loved LA, and I always knew that someday I wanted to live in the Big Apple. And so I guess I thought that I was proud of both places, and then I went to college, and I met someone from Texas. Wow. I mean, they take state pride to a whole new level. I mean, I thought that I liked New York and all, but I never thought of bringing New York State-shaped notepads to school. True story. I didn't have New York State posters on my wall. I didn't wear New York State merchandise. But these Texas students were ablaze with state pride and paraphernalia. Now, 25 years ago, the Texas State Department of Transportation used that pride to wage one of the most successful advertising campaigns in history. They had a litter problem. You all are probably, a lot of people local at Arkansas, I'm close to the heart, so you know this story. They had a litter problem, so they ran the ad campaign featuring prominent, well-known Texans, stating the now famous line, "Don't mess with Texas." That's right, don't mess with Texas. This was brilliant. It was brilliant because the problem wasn't that a bunch of horrible Oklahomans and Louisianans and Arkansanians, people from Arkansas. Problem wasn't that all these outsiders were sneaking over the border and throwing their trash on Texas. It was a homegrown problem, but the ad made it seem like an outsider problem. More than that, it gave them a mantra, a banner, a slogan to represent so much of who they wanted to be. And littering declined a lot. In the first 4 years this ad campaign ran, littering declined by 72%. That is an enormous adoption rate. Imagine if you ran a company and you could run an ad campaign where 72% of the people watching the ads bought your product. Slogans matter. All right, let me give you the second example. And for this, I need a lot of audience participation. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I'd like to see how aligned you are as an audience. I want to see if you can all answer at the same answer all together now. So here we go. Can we elect a black man president? Yes, we can. I got one who really got it, and then we got. I'm going to move these forward. All right, can we achieve health care reform? Yes. This isn't going over as well as I imagined it, let me tell you. All right, we'll try one more. Can we get our economy back on track? Yes, we can. All right, that's much better. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Slogans matter. The best of them bring out the best in us and then push us on to even greater action. So we have great slogans for politics and for civic pride, but we lack a universal slogan, a universal set of language, ideas for resilience and for overcoming the challenges that we face. Today, I'm going to offer you that slogan. The slogan is, be the hero. Too often and too easily, we all fall into victim mode. We blame others. We turn minor frustrations into major aggravations. We claim helplessness and hopelessness. And lest you think that maybe this doesn't really apply to you, I'm going to offer you some victim stories, some victim sentences. And once again, I'm going to leave it to you to finish these sentences. So we'll see if, again, collectively as an audience, you can answer these all together. So I'm going to start the sentence, point to you to finish it. Let's see how well we can do on this one. Here's the first victim sentence. Why is this happening? You know this story. All right. Let's try another one. My boss is a... You know that one. How many bosses in the room? I don't want to say anything about who they're talking about, but... All right, let's try one more. This job... See? You know that's right, stinks. We'll keep it clean tonight. You know these stories. We all know these stories. We all act like victims from time to time. Instead, be the hero. Be the hero for yourself. Be the hero for others. Be the hero for your cause, since this is the School for Public Service. Be the hero. But we're going to talk more about what that means and the 3 strengths that you build when you take on this mantra, this slogan, empathy, gratitude, and hope, and why those are so very, very important. And I'd like to start with looking at the tradition of this idea, some of the background, the history behind it. 2,500 years ago, the Buddha stated, our life is the creation of our mind. And recently, lots of other disciplines are chiming in with the same idea. Positive psychology, cognitive psychology, emotional intelligence, neuroscience, they are all saying that we can retrain, reprogram our brains in a way that will make us more effective, more productive. It will make us happier. It will make us more successful. We become more creative and open-minded. We make better decisions. We're better at problem solving if we simply engage in some simple behaviors that reprogram our brains to see the world in a different way. So what are these behaviors? I call these behaviors our stories. And every day we tell ourselves dozens of stories that fall into 3 categories. We tell ourselves people stories about how others are or are not treating us fairly. We tell situation stories about whether or not we're getting what we want or deserve out of life. And we tell ourselves self stories about what we can or cannot do. Every day we tell these stories, and the content of the stories you choose to tell determine the happiness, the success, the productivity, and the effectiveness you experience in your life. Let me put this in other terms for you. How many of you work out? And you're allowed to lie to this question. So everybody, go ahead. Yeah, raise your hand. 7 days a week, sure. Yeah. Now, what music, for those of you who listen to music during your workout, what music do you listen to? Upbeat, dance music? Yeah, rock and roll. I get a lot of rock and roll, a lot of dance, a lot of hip hop when I ask this question. And there's a reason for that. When you work out, they've actually done studies that show that when you work out, if you listen to upbeat, up-tempo music, you actually can run faster, run further, and you report enjoying your workout more than when you listen to low-tempo, slower music. Well, the stories that you tell yourself are like a soundtrack playing in the back of your head all day, every day. And that soundtrack is either an upbeat soundtrack that is giving you energy, helping you to perform more effectively, to be at your best, or it is a downbeat. It's a victim soundtrack that is taking away your energy and sapping you of your ability to be at your best. Now, I don't think anybody here would argue that we should all have less energy. We should have less empathy, less gratitude, less hope. But nor do we have any sort of method, any sort of intentional process by which we build these 3 strengths. Be the hero will be our campaign slogan for building these strengths and for building in you more productivity, more resilience, and yes, greater happiness as well. So let's talk about these stories, and let's start with the people stories. And I have a question, actually 2 questions that I'd like to ask you, and I need for all of you to close your eyes for these 2 questions. You can grab onto your wallet while you do it, but close your eyes, and I'd like for you to keep your eyes closed and raise your hand if you know someone who you consider to be a jerk. All right, keep your hands high up so I can see them. I'm going to do a quick count. Keep your eyes closed, and okay, hands down. And now keep your eyes closed, and this time I'd like for you to raise your hand if you consider yourself to be a jerk. And hands down, and you can open your eyes. Wow, that was so awesome. You want to know what I saw? About 95% of you know someone who you consider to be a jerk. But there were only about 6 of you who consider yourselves to be the jerk. And they were all at the same table, too. You want to know which table? No, I kid. But how can this be? How is it that and this happens to me all the time, I always get to speak to the audiences who know the jerks, but I never get to speak to the jerks themselves. How is that possible? Well, the truth is that we all act like jerks from time to time. But somehow when I do something wrong, it isn't really my fault. You know, I didn't sleep the night before. I had a headache. You know, the other guy started it. I have all kinds of explanations and rationalizations for my own behavior, my own mistakes. Somehow, we're not as forgiving when it comes to other people. We see them this way. And psychologists have a term for this. They call this the actor-observer bias. See, when we are the actor, we are looking outside of ourselves. We're looking at our circumstances, our environment. We're looking at the other people, the things happening. And so when we make a mistake, we understand all of the situational influences that might have affected our choices to cause us to act the way we did. So we tend to attribute our mistakes to our environment. However, when we're seeing somebody else make a mistake, maybe even the same mistake that we've made, we are looking at them. We're watching them. And so when they make the mistake, we attribute their mistake to some deep internal personality flaw that they must have. They must be a jerk. Now, John Lubbock was a British politician and archaeologist. I thought he said this brilliantly. He said, what we see depends mainly on what we look for. We see what we look for. So I'm going to ask you a question 3 times tonight. The question is, what would the hero see? What would the hero see in other people? See, when we go into victim mode, we see only our own pain, our own challenge, our own frustrations. And we use that as justification for all of our anger and outrage. That person did this to me. They wronged me. They hurt me. When we are in hero mode, when we tell hero stories about other people, we see their pain, their challenges, and we don't just passively see them. We actively look for, we seek out what struggle might they be going through that might have caused them to act in this way. And in so doing, we open up the possibility that we can respond with more understanding, more reasonable responses. Now, all of this builds the strength of empathy. And this approach applies to responding more effectively to family members, to coworkers, and yes, even to people who don't share your political views. So be the hero when people disagree. Be the hero even when people fight against you. Be the hero so that you can perform at your best no matter what anybody else throws your way. Now, somebody usually asks me, yeah, but what do you do when someone really is a jerk? For that, we need to turn to our second story, the story that we tell about our situation. And I have another question for you, and I'd like for you to write down the very first answer that comes to your mind. Overachievers in the room, feel free to write down more than one answer. Here's the question. What is one thing that makes you happy? All right, if you wrote down a person, family member, friend, any person, or if you're a pet owner and you wrote down your animal, the non-pet owners think you're weird, but that's okay. If you wrote down a person or an animal, raise your hand. All right, you are caretakers. You thrive on relationships. All right, if you wrote down any object, a car or money or iPad owners, you know who you are. If you wrote down any object, raise your hand if you wrote an object down. All right, we have 2 materialists in the room. You wrote down more than one, okay. And clearly this is a highly scientific, valid study that I'm doing here. And if you wrote down an activity, eating or exercising or any kind of activity, raise your hand if you're in this group. All right, you are pleasure seekers. You thrive on, maybe it's better not to talk about what you guys thrive on. Once again, pleasure seekers, raise your hand. Yes, everybody check them out. All right. Other than having a little bit of fun, there's a reason why I ask these questions. We're talking about situation stories. And situation stories too often sound like this. I don't have what I want. I want more stuff. I deserve more stuff. My life is painful. It's boring. It's unfair. Why do I have to go through these things? Why is it happening to me? Well, I had been helping people to change their stories for years. When my youngest daughter, Ella, here she is looking like an angel. Yes, I feel the same way. At the age of 6 months, Ella had what appeared to be a seizure. Her eyes rolled back in her head, her body went stiff. She was completely unresponsive for about 15 seconds. Well, my wife and I took her to the hospital, and a room full of neurologists confirmed our fears. Yes, they said, that looks like a seizure to us. We spent the next 5 days living in the hospital with test after test coming back negative. Eventually, Ella proved the neurologists wrong. It turned out that her behaviors were an unusual symptomatic response to reflux. It was her stomach, not her brain, that was bothering her. Now, this was a very difficult week with unquestionably a wonderful ending. The family who shared our hospital room and with whom we became friends and have kept in touch ever since have faced a much longer ordeal. Their son, Will, was having seizures, sometimes as many as 200 in a day. He had to have 3 different brain surgeries that removed almost the entire right side of his brain. And in the midst of all of that, his mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. Now, it's hard to imagine anybody telling positive stories through this sort of experience. Yet they have, and they do. They are quick to point out how lucky they are. They talk about their incredibly supportive friends and family, their amazing doctors. They tell stories about hospital waiting rooms where they meet people facing challenges worse than their own. I mean, they should have bragging rights over everybody. But these are the stories that they choose to tell. And let's be clear, the stories are a choice. They could just as easily tell the story about how incredibly unfair it all is, and certainly be justified. But they choose these stories not to ignore the reality, but rather to give themselves the strength to face their reality. Now, you may feel that you have the right to be angry at times. You have the right to be bitter. And that's true. You have the right to any emotion you want to feel. But one of the most amazing lessons that I've learned in my life came from my friends from the hospital. And that is that at those exact same moments, at those exact same times, you also have every right to feel appreciative, grateful, even happy. And my friend Rob's story is important, not just because gratitude is this nice thing, but gratitude has real-world, tangible benefits for you and your work. Robert Emmons and Michael McCullough are researchers who wanted to see just what does gratitude really do. And so they took about 150 undergrads and they had them keep a journal once per week. Some of the undergrads were asked once a week to write down irritants, hassles, things that bothered them from the prior week. Their entries were things like hard to find parking, stupid people driving, and taking a horrible test. Another group was asked to write down things for which they could be grateful. Their entries were things like waking up this morning, God for giving me drive and perseverance, and my personal favorite, the Rolling Stones. Yes, rock on. For 9 weeks, they were asked to write down 5 irritants or things to be grateful for each week. And at the end of those 9 weeks, the first thing that they discovered will not surprise you, will not impress you. And that is, they discovered that people who wrote down things that they were grateful for actually felt more grateful. Okay, thank you. That's not very impressive. But here's where it gets interesting. The students who wrote down gratitude items were also more optimistic about the week ahead. They reported fewer symptoms of ailment and illness, and they exercised more. Other studies, similar studies, the same kind of formula in terms of the process for the study, have shown gratitude to lead to more helping behaviors, sleeping better. It's been shown that people who kept gratitude lists made significantly more progress towards their personal goals, academic, interpersonal, and health-based. Gratitude makes a difference. It isn't just a nice to have. From the simple act of gratitude, these groups go down significantly different paths. Study after study show that the act of being thankful leads to personal, professional benefits across all acts of life. So, what would the hero see? Well, the victim sees only those things they want, only those things they desire. Why don't I have that wife or that life or those things? Why isn't the world the way I want it to be? And I want you to know that I take great pride in my PowerPoint presentations. And this next slide is by far my favorite. This is the best picture I could find to display desire. I just want what those cows over there have. Why can't I have what those cows have? The hero sees what they have. They see what they have. They celebrate what they have. This isn't to say that the hero lacks desire, but they focus on what they can be appreciative of in order to give themselves the strength to pursue their desires. All of this, all of these actions, these beliefs, these approaches build the strength of gratitude. So, be the hero when someone else gets what you want. Be the hero when you might otherwise think you deserve better. And be the hero so that you can be at your best no matter what the world throws your way. Now, earlier I asked you to write down one thing that makes you happy. What I'd like for you to do now is you have a card in front of you. It says energy card at the top. And I'd like for you to take about 30 seconds and write down as many things as you can in 30 seconds that give you energy. People who inspire you, things that make you happy, anything that you have to be grateful for. All right. Take a minute now and turn to somebody sitting next to you. Hopefully you've gotten at least a couple of items down. Take a minute and turn to somebody sitting next to you and just share, take about 30 seconds each to share one of the items on your list and why you put it there. All right, let me bring you back. I know that was quick, but I have a question for you, and I'd like for you just to shout out one word, a one-word answer to this question, which is writing those things down, talking about them, listening to them with the other person. How'd that make you feel? Great. Good, great. Yeah, that's the whole point. The whole point of your people stories, your situation stories, is to make you feel good, to make you feel great, to fill you with the positive energy you need. Because sometimes we need more than simply putting a happy face on a tough situation, or as some people would say, putting lipstick on a pig. I'm sorry, I really couldn't resist. And sometimes we need to take action. We can't just be happy with the way things are. And that brings us to our third story. The third story is a story that we tell about ourselves. Now, the hero believes that there's always something that she can do. There's always an action she can take, and she relentlessly pursues some action. This doesn't mean that she's always successful, but she refuses to accept that there's nothing available. There's no possibility. The victim, on the other hand, is helpless and hopeless. I have no control over this. Nothing I do makes any difference. I can't change things. In order to change things, I'd need to have more. More what? What would I need to have more of in order to change things? What do you think? More money. Right. What else? More time. More power. more patience. How about more votes? More, more, more. More budget. More pleasure. We could all use more pleasure. Who I am today, what I am now isn't good enough. There's nothing I can do. That's the mantra of the victim. There's nothing I can do. Well, none of us lives without options. Rather, we live in fear of the consequences of our options. There's nothing I can do is usually a more comfortable way of saying I'm afraid of what will happen if I take action. Well, we need to get past that fear to take heroic action. Mother Teresa knew a little something about hope and action. She said, I know God will not give me anything I can't handle. I just wish he didn't trust me so much. Yes, Mother Teresa had a sense of humor. Well, sometimes it feels that way, like God or somebody is trusting us just a little too much. Like our challenges are maybe beyond what we can handle. But that reminds me of one of my other favorite quotes by former U.S. Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis, who said, most of the things worth doing in the world had been declared impossible before they were done. See, when you see a problem as solvable, there is a fundamental shift in how you think and how you act. What we're talking about doing here is intentionally building the strength of hope. Now, Rick Snyder was a University of Kansas psychologist who was really interested in this idea of hope, of how does hope actually affect us? And so he asked his students, he gave them this hypothetical. He said, you set yourself a goal of getting a B in a class. But after the first test, which accounts for 30% of the grade, you discover you scored a D. It's now 1 week later, what do you do? Now this seems like a fairly simple, straightforward question, one that shouldn't allow for a huge amount of variation. But there was. Students who were high in hope said that they were going to work harder and came up with a significantly wider array of ideas for how they would go about trying to improve their grade. Students who were low in hope gave up trying to achieve their goal, completely demoralized. And if you want to go beyond the theoretical or the hypothetical, Snyder also discovered, and this I found fascinating, that hope was a better predictor of freshman academic success than SAT scores. Is there anybody from the admissions department here tonight? That's extraordinary. And this doesn't just apply to simple, scholarly, school-based academic issues. In 1985, Rotary International set off on an endeavor that many at the time thought was impossible, the worldwide eradication of polio. But simply saying that they were going to do that set off a chain of events that led to the single largest public health initiative in history. And in 1985, when they began, over 350,000 children every year were paralyzed or killed by this disease. As of April 6th of this year, worldwide there have been 56 cases. Hope and belief change things. They change how you act and they change the results you get. In May 1961, John F. Kennedy made possible in people's minds the idea that we could put a man on the moon, and their beliefs and their actions then followed. When you reject the idea of impossible, you change the reality of what is possible, and you make yourself more creative, more energized, and better able to achieve. So I'd like to do another exercise now, and it's a timed exercise, so I need you ready with a pen, and you have an index card in front of you. So if you have a blank side to that, that would be wonderful. So everybody grab a pen and your index card, and you're gonna have 30 seconds. 30 seconds, everybody ready? Draw the person sitting next to you, go. All right, I hear a lot of laughter, that's a good thing. During the exercise, I heard one person say, oh no. That cannot be good. Now, how many of you, when I said this, when I gave the instructions, thought of yourselves as really talented artists? All right, just for the record, there are more of you who consider yourselves to be jerks than artists. I'm not sure what that says about you, but take it for what it is. I'm guessing there were more than a few of you who thought to yourself, well, this isn't going to turn out well. In fact, it's going to be awful. It's going to be ugly, but you did it. You said, I'd rather take an action. I'd rather be a part of this. I'd rather participate, do something, do anything than to sit on the sidelines doing nothing, guaranteeing only failure. That is the mentality of the hero. That is what we're building towards. So, what would the hero see? The victim sees only what is impossible, sees only what cannot be done. And they wrap themselves up in the mantra, there's nothing I can do. The hero sees what can be done. In fact, they relentlessly pursue, they seek out, they find, no matter what challenges are in front of them, some action they can take. That is the hero's story about themselves. All of this is both based on and builds the strength of hope. So, I encourage you, be the hero when others might give up. Be the hero when the odds seem stacked against you. And be the hero so that you can perform at your best, even when others might think that your task is impossible. We've now examined 3 ways to adopt this campaign for living, for rejecting the beliefs, the emotions, and the outcomes of the victim, and instead being the hero. So when you look at other people, reject focusing on your own pain, your own challenges, and instead look for, seek out, what are their struggles, what are their challenges, and build the strength of empathy. When you look at your situation, reject frustration over what you don't yet have or haven't yet achieved, and instead focus on what you can appreciate and be thankful for and build the strength of gratitude. And when you look at yourself, reject the hopeless and helpless victim, and instead remember that there is always a step you can take, always some way to move forward and build the skill, the strength of hope. So I'd like to close with one last story. This is a story about a school in Hawaii. The setting is idyllic. It is situated on a white sandy beach with rugged, beautiful mountains as a backdrop. This high school has won more national media, broadcasting, and journalism awards than any other school in the state. It's not Punahou. In fact, it's not a private school. This is no school of privilege. From one of the poorest towns in Hawaii, Waianae High School has a dismal academic performance record. By the standards of No Child Left Behind, since 2002, Waianae has met only 7 out of 112 targets. It is a high crime area that has been forgotten by state decision makers. And while the miles of beaches rival Waikiki, you won't find people sunbathing there. You will find them fishing for food. And you'll find many of the students from Waianae High School living there on the beach in tents with their families because they cannot afford a home. This is the contrast of the world that they live in. The children there grow up in an atmosphere of homelessness, abuse, poverty, and crime. Their experience is one of survival rather than childhood. So how did a school like this become a powerhouse in a field like media, regularly beating out schools of privilege from all over the country? Bill Gates did not happen upon Waianae while on vacation and pull out his checkbook and catapult them to success. No, it was a Spanish teacher, Candy Suizo, herself a graduate of Waianae, who saw interest from the students. She had used a VHS video camera as a learning tool in one of her Spanish classes. And all of a sudden, the students were having fun learning. And so she brought the idea to her principal for a video production class. She applied for a grant to buy 3 video cameras, and in 1993, Sea Rider Productions, the Waianae High School media production class or group, was created. Now, in its first year, Sea Rider Productions enrolled 85 students. They were crammed into one room with no air conditioning and electrical wiring from the 50s that they regularly blew out whenever they were trying to do their work. Also in its first year, Sea Rider Productions won its first National Media Award, the History Day Project, beating out over 500 other schools from across the country. Now, in the years since, they have won over 1,000 local, national, and international awards. They now enroll over 400 students in the program, and every year they win over 100 awards. And They're currently in the process of building what will become the nation's first ever statewide student-run news network. I asked Candy Suiso what she's most proud of, and she said it's the students who break out of the welfare cycle, the ones who graduate, they go to college, they get jobs, and they become productive members of society. I asked her, what message would you like to send to the world? And she said, every child has something to offer, some good in them. Look for and encourage that good. Because if we can reach the children of Y and I, you can reach anyone in your world. There is no one so insignificant they cannot beat the powers that be. There is no lack of resources that prevents fighting for what you believe in. And there is nothing that you need to wait for to begin to make the difference you wish to make in the world. There's only what you choose to do with who you are and what you have. There's only what you turned a blind eye to or refuse to accept in the status quo. And there is only the person you decide to be and the actions you decide to take. So now you have your campaign slogan for living, for meeting the challenges of today and tomorrow. Be the hero. Today and every day, over and over, remind yourself to be the hero. Thank you.
We do have time for some questions. If you raise your hand, we'll get a microphone to you.
Yesterday in Congress, they interviewed the CEO of, what is that company? Goldman Sachs. Do you think, how can you apply that your be your hero thing to that kind of situation?
Well, so what I would say is this. This model is a progressive model. And so I didn't actually mean it that way, but take it that way. It's a progressive model in that we often fall into victim mode, and the ordering of this is intentional. We often fall into victim mode because something does something that harms us, and we have a choice of whether or not to take offense, be angry, and that anger can turn us into a person we don't want to be, and it can take away from us our ability to not only be effective in what we do and who we are, but to enjoy what we do and who we are. And so, as a first step, it's important to look for the challenges that other people are facing and go through that process with other people. That gives you the energy to then be a better person in that way. But it doesn't always work. You can't always look away from what somebody's doing. You can't always forgive someone their words and their actions. And that's where the next two stories really come in, which is that no matter what the CEO of Goldman Sachs or anybody from the political party that you don't belong to does or says, you still have the life you have, and you have lots to be thankful for. And so choosing to pay attention to that, again, gives you the energy so that if the world doesn't look the way you want it to look, if Goldman Sachs isn't acting the way you want it to act, you can choose to do something about it. And so that third story is, what are you going to do? If you really don't like what they're saying, stop yelling at the TV. Now the question is, what are you going to do about it? And so it gives you a level of empowerment to take action.
Have you ever been in your life more of a victim and less of a hero? Was there some kind of occurrence in your life that changed you and changed your outlook, or maybe inspired you with this whole idea?
Well, have I ever been a victim? First of all, let me say this. It drives me crazy. I wrote the book, and I still go into victim mode, and it drives me nuts but that's the point. We all do. Every single one of us does. This isn't about, oh, there are heroes in the world and there are victims in the world. No, we're all heroes, we're all victims. The question is, what's your ratio? And how can you continue to build so that your ratio gets better and stronger so that you're spending more time in that hero mode. Now, a story that I didn't tell tonight that I usually tell actually leads up to that whole thing I did about, why is this happening to me? My boss is a jerk. Those were my stories. I had my first job out of graduate school. I had an awesome job for about 2 years. Then the market crashed. My manager turned into, an absolute pain in the rear end. But here's the thing, there were reasons for his actions, and I couldn't accept it, I couldn't see it, I couldn't deal with it. And so I was miserable. I mean, I went from a high performer, high potential in the organization, supposed to be like a future star of the organization, to somebody who you didn't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. And I did that to myself. Other people were going through the exact same challenges I was, and they chose other responses. So yes, I had that victim. I've had many victim times in my life. But what I would say is I don't have them much anymore, and they don't last very long when I do. And one of the big turning points was this experience in the hospital, and seeing this individual and how unbelievably inspiring he was. It just made a huge difference.
Yeah.
Can you give some specific examples of how people can switch out of that victim mode into the hero mode, such as volunteerism or making a positive contribution to their community through a crisis?
Absolutely. So what I would say is that you can actually volunteer and still make yourself miserable. It's just harder. I mean, in fairness, it's true. I have, actually, I was going to tell a family story, but we're taping this. It's going to be on the internet, so I'm not going to do that. But it's true that what we consume in terms of media, what we consume in terms of experiences, you being here tonight, what you watch on TV, the conversations you choose to have with the people around you, all those things influence how you think and who you become. And so when you volunteer, you think about making the world a better place, and you think about people who are probably worse off than you are, struggling in ways that you're not struggling. And so it makes you feel good on many levels. It makes you feel good because you realize how much you have to be thankful for. It makes you feel good because you're giving to others, and giving is one of those things that's been shown to have tremendous positive benefits, health-wise, emotionally, psychologically, all these positive things. And so, yes, what I would say is volunteer in the community, do something, give, be charitable. I think I'm forgetting his first name again, Brooks. Arthur Brooks, who was here. I actually watched several of the speakers' videos. You guys are so lucky to have, all these amazing people. I mean, I wish that I was here and I could come see that, although I guess now I know and I can watch them all on the internet, so that's cool. But he talked about how giving actually makes you happier and more successful at the same time. What a concept. But the media that you absorb does change you. And so when you watch MTV Cribs, yes, that makes you feel worse about your house than when you go and work at a homeless shelter. So pay attention is the real advice. Pay attention to what you're listening to, what you're absorbing. And that includes, unfortunately, people around you who have victim stories. And how do you pull them out of those victim stories? And if you can't pull them out of those victim stories, how do you limit the way they either affect you or limit your exposure, which is not always an easy choice to make.
Bob?
Tell us about the results or feedback you're getting from this speech and from your book, the stories.
And I didn't pay him for that question. This book has, without question, been, other than the family and fatherhood, this has been the most rewarding thing I've ever done. I've had emails and letters and phone calls from people who have said things like, I have cancer and this has helped me through 6 months of chemo. I had somebody who I just got an email this past week from a woman who said, I saw you a year ago, and I was coming out of a really messy divorce, and I realized after seeing you how negative I was making everything, and I've changed, and people of work have noticed, and it's totally changed my life. I mean, the responses have been tremendous. And the bizarre award goes to the person who emailed me to say that it had cured his fear of flying. So, results may vary.
Nathaniel?
My name is Nathaniel Owen. I'm a student here at the Clinton School. I appreciate you being here. My question is about the context of public service. One of the tensions that we deal with in being involved in public service is dealing with communities who have faced real obstacles, whether it's poverty or race or educational access. And how do you strike that balance between definitely affirming and respecting the fact that they've faced real tangible obstacles that many of us do not face, with not wanting to reinforce that victimhood mindset, but challenging them to pursue a hero mindset like you speak about?
So it's very difficult for the groups that you're describing. My experience is it's very difficult to get them on board with the gratitude piece of this puzzle. And with the people piece of this puzzle, it's fine within their own circle. Like you can tell them, you can talk about being the hero with the people around you and so forth, but being the hero with the man who's pushed us down or whatever, it's much more difficult to get that message through. But what I would say is that the message that you can get through is the third message, which it's, again, this model is built the way it is because there is a certain logical progression, but sometimes you need to skip to the end. And I maybe I have not often been accused of being subtle. And so with a lot of these situations, and I get, maybe not in the same sort of context that you are, but in a lot of the speaking that I do in different audiences that I get in front of, one of the questions that I get to ask a lot is, okay, so what? So now you're in this place. What's going to happen next? And what are your actions going to, which direction are your actions going to influence what happens next? Because your actions will influence what happens next. They're just going to influence it in one direction or another. So what? What are we going to do? I don't know. I hope that's helpful.
Hi, I'd just like to thank you for being here. And this has been, if I'd filled out this energy card a little bit later, I think you would have been, your name definitely would have been on here. This is really kismet for me because the book that I'm reading right now, and I hate to plug another book, but this is really in the same vein, is the book by Robert Emmons called Thanks. And he in a very secular way, because a lot of this feels very spiritual to me, but in a very secular way, explains how gratitude, whether or not you believe in a higher power, God, whatever, will make you happier. And it's a scientific, he proves it scientifically, and at the end of the book, he outlines just exactly how you can go about doing this. And I find it that, like I said, this is kismet for me because it's all falling into place, and I'm so excited about your book. I can't wait to read it.
Oh, thank you. Well, I do want to comment on, first of all, I don't mind you plugging another book. Robert Emmons he's one of the ones who I mentioned in here about with Michael McCullough. He's a partner on a lot of his research and specifically on gratitude. I absolutely, there are a lot of books out there that are phenomenal books on this topic, on similar topics. And what I would say is with any of them, the challenge that I would issue to you with any book that you read like this, that has power, that really has the kind of opportunity or possibility to shape you, to really help you to be happier, a better person, is figure out a way not to leave it on the shelf. That's my big concern with books. And so my first book was called You're Addicted to You. It's about why people don't change. And a lot of it is about how we as human beings learn. And as much as I would love to say that you will leave here forever changed, some of you will. You'll take this. I mean, we know that there will always be some who adopt immediately, and there will be some who let it go. But figure out ways that you can keep the messages going for important books like the one you're describing. This is one of the reasons why I give the cards that I do. I've had people who've walked up to me years after a program and say, "Oh, I saw you at such and such program years ago," and they pull out their cards that they still carry in their wallets every day. So you have the energy cards you can hang on to. You have the second card there just gives kind of a brief overview of the three kind of main topics or main concepts of the book. And these, by the way, the summary cards are in the book as a cutout in the back of the book. And I think every book should have one of these. And in fact, when I read books that I like, I create my own little index card of the major points that I want to remember, because otherwise they go on the shelf and they become forgotten. And there's so much important stuff out there that we shouldn't leave it behind.
We have time for two more. Justin, you still have one? Kinda, not really.
My question was actually, I think you kind of just sort of answered it, but I was going to mention that your last book was You're Addicted to You and How Hard It Is to Change, and then this sort of presentation was a lot of about how we need to change the way we tell our stories and the way we approach situations. So I guess my question was, aside from doing the cards and stuff, are there any like specific sort of like hero yoga that we need to be doing on a daily basis to kind of, keep the message fresh?
I like the idea of hero yoga. Well, I started this talk by talking about how slogans matter, and that really wasn't just for, actually that piece of it I really did create just for the Clinton School, but the premise of it is part of what I do all the time, which is there's a reason why I use the phrase be the hero. There's a reason why I named the book Be the Hero, which is I want you to be able to remember the title of the book, and from the title of the book alone to be able to remember the major concept, the major thrust of it. And so even with what I ended, this may sound really simple, but even if this alone, the next time you're angry, just say, be the hero, be the hero, be the hero. Say that 3 times to yourself, be the hero. That alone, there's a certain progression that you go through when you try to make a change. One is you're in a situation like this where you're not in the place where you do the thing you don't want to do, and you make a decision, I'd like to not do that thing that I don't like doing. And then the next stage in the progression is you go and you do the thing that you didn't want to do, even though you just said you weren't going to do it anymore. And you realize, hey, I'm doing that thing that I don't want to do, but I can't stop myself. Well, one of the ways to get to the point of stopping yourself is to have something that you can fall back on in that moment as soon as you realize that you're doing that thing or about to do that thing, which is why I premise all of this on this idea of a slogan, be the hero. Just thinking that concept alone, it has, the fact is, and I mentioned the word neuroscience earlier. Neuroplasticity is a fascinating field to me about how it's the science behind how our brains keep changing beyond what neuroscientists thought up until really the last 10, 15 years, was that after age 15 or so, your brain is set in place, it never changes. And neuroplasticity field has come along and said, oh, actually, no, if you do certain things on a routine basis, you can restructure your brain. What a concept. And so having something as simple as this, but also hero is tied into all sorts of emotions, and you have visuals of hero, you have music associated with hero. When you just think the word hero, it conjures up all those neural networks. And so when you use Be the Hero as your slogan, you actually build on this huge neural network that you already have that will help you to kind of get out of those old victim behaviors.
Sure.
I know very little about the publishing industry, but for that it's tough to get a book published. And I wondered if you had to remind yourself of being the hero as you struggled to, you may not have, I guess when you wrote a book already, maybe they gave it to you on precedent or something, but maybe they didn't. I wondered if you faced some struggles with even getting a book like this published, and if you had to remind yourself of what the book was about to push forward?
You know, mine is one of those weird stories. So I discovered the publisher that I wanted coincidentally through an article in Fast Company at the exact same moment in my life when I had just finished writing the proposal for my first book. And I printed up the proposal, stuck it in an envelope, sent it to the publisher, didn't even have a cover letter. Had no contact there, and they called me up 2 weeks later and said they wanted to publish it. That doesn't happen much. And I don't for a minute, by the way, believe that my book was like the best book out of the thousands that they get that way. It just happened to hit the right person's desk at the right moment where the message clicked with them. And so I was afraid for a long time, and I didn't, it took me a long time to get the courage to finally work on the book and put the proposal together. But once I finally did it, it actually happened immediately. The irony is that Be the Hero, which I believe is a much, much better book than my first book. I learned a lot through after the first writing process. Was much more difficult to get my publisher to publish because they didn't believe that I could write a parable. So, and I think it is a much more readable, much more fun book and much more effective book than my first book. And
That's a
well,
great lead in to book.
actually, could I just say one last thing? I just want to say, for you guys who've thanked me for being here, I meant what I said. It is such an honor and a privilege to be here speaking to all of you. And I also want to offer one last thing, which is that there are envelopes on the table, Leading Principles envelopes. If you would like to receive weekly hero tips, just drop a business card in the envelope or write your name and email address on the envelope. And that's one of the other things that can kind of be a continual reminder to you to kind of keep these ideas front and center.
Well, on that note, Noah is actually going to stay here to sign the books, and then you can buy the books over here. Thank you all for coming and being so involved tonight. I know it's a little different than our usual program, but we appreciate you coming, and we'll see you all at the next one. Thanks.